Lisa Carter stood at the edge of the Great Hall of the Galactic Council and tried to keep her voice calm as the chamber lights dimmed and the alien delegates began to argue about humanity again. She could hear the sharp clicking sounds of the Phyrexian speakers as they called humans a danger to peace, while the soft-toned voices of the Ullan tried to suggest that maybe Earth had changed, but the rest only shook their heads and whispered about old wars and human violence, and how Earth spread too fast among the stars in too short a time. Lisa had spent years trying to change their minds. She had spoken in this same hall more times than she could count, telling them that humanity was not what it once was, that humans had learned and grown. But it did not matter to them. For every success story there was always someone ready to remind the Council of Human Wars, and the way Earth rose from the ashes again and again. The vote came down to the same result, every time rejection. The Galactic Council rejected Earth's membership again and again until today. When they finally made it official, humanity was out of the Council forever, and no longer even allowed to attend as observers. She looked down at the datapad in her hand that showed the final vote. The word rejected blinked red in small letters on the screen, and she felt a cold weight settle in her chest. She walked out without a word, her steps slow and steady, while the alien guards watched her go in silence. Outside the hall, Commander Ethan Brooks waited for her, his dark eyes searching her face for any sign of hope, but he knew the answer before she even spoke. She looked up at him and said softly, "They fear us more than they hate us." And Ethan nodded. Once without surprise, they both stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of the closing chamber doors. The sound heavy, like the end of something big and final. He asked her what now, and she said, "We go home." And that was the start of it. Humanity turned inward after that, slowly at first, and then with purpose. No one wanted to depend on the Council anymore. The trade stations closed one by one. The diplomats left alien capitals, and the humans who had built lives among other worlds came back to Earth. Ships once filled with goods returned empty, but with determination in their crews on Earth, people began to build again, not because they had allies, but because they had themselves. Ethan was placed in charge of the new defense fleet formed by the United Earth Command, and Lisa was made the head of what was left of the diplomatic corps, but there was little diplomacy left to do. Most of their old partners followed the Council's orders and cut ties with humanity. Those who refused were pressured until they gave in. But the humans adapted as they always did. They built their own routes, their own networks, their own industries. Mars became a hub for new shipyards. The Moon held new factories. Titan turned into a mining world, and every colony found its purpose. Life was not easy, but there was pride in it again. People talked about the old Earth spirit, about survival and unity, and how no one else would ever decide their fate again. Lisa often met with Ethan in the command center orbiting Earth, where they watched the construction of new warships together. She would tell him that she still hoped for peace, and he would tell her that peace only came when one was strong enough to defend it. There were days when she wanted to believe him, and days when she could not. In those quiet nights, she would look up at the stars and wonder if the Council ever thought about what they had done. Perhaps they felt safer. Now that humanity was gone, perhaps they believed they had avoided a threat, but in truth they had created something new and stronger. Years passed. The Council continued their debates and politics as usual, while humans worked in silence, building faster engines and more powerful weapons driven by the memory of rejection. The scientists on Mars discovered a new energy field deep in the Perseid Rift, and the engineers used it to make ships faster than any the aliens could match. Amanda Brooks, one of Ethan's engineers, created new reactor cores that made ships small but powerful, and soon the first fleet of human-built long-range cruisers took shape above Mars. They named them Liberty Class, not for power, but for meaning. Freedom from dependence on anyone else. When the first ship launched, the entire planet watched it rise into the black sky, leaving behind a trail of bright fire that glowed like hope against the cold stars. The Council noticed, of course. Their spies saw everything they watched as humans grew stronger and wondered if they had made a mistake, but pride and fear kept them silent. They would not reach out first. They believed humanity would one day destroy itself again. And when that happened, the Council would be ready to pick up the pieces. But humanity did not fall apart. It stood taller. Ethan's fleet expanded, the colonies grew stronger, and trade flourished between the human worlds. Every new ship carried the same symbol, a silver circle broken by a rising line that meant no chains, no control, no surrender. Lisa continued to receive messages from neutral worlds asking for trade, even secret talks about forming alliances. Though she always refused publicly, she began to think that maybe one day humanity could lead something bigger, not by asking for approval, but by being the example. The Council had lost something they did not even understand. They had lost the chance to guide humanity when it needed it most. Now humanity had learned to guide itself. Ethan spent long nights watching the stars from his flagship, thinking about how strange it was that peace could feel so much like waiting for a storm. He knew it would come sooner or later. The Council could not ignore humanity forever. He hoped they would remember that it was them who chose rejection, not Earth, and that when the time came for contact again, humanity would no longer come with open hands, but with equal standing. The news channels across the colonies showed clips of children on Mars waving small Earth flags. While their parents worked in shipyards, everyone said the same thing: we build for ourselves now in time. The old anger began to fade, replaced by quiet determination. But deep down, everyone remembered how it began: a single vote in a room full of alien voices deciding that humanity was unworthy of standing beside them. Lisa often replayed that day in her mind, the faces, the words, the sound of rejection. And though she still wished for peace, she also knew that they would never beg for it. Again, when she met Ethan again years later on the bridge of the new flagship Horizon, she said, "We are not alone anymore. We just stopped waiting for them to accept us." He smiled faintly and said, "Then let them come when they are ready." And the ship moved forward into the endless dark, carrying with it the fire that could not be put out. A fire born not of anger but of pride. And the will to endure the stars did not belong to anyone but to those brave enough to reach for them. And humanity was reaching farther every day, and though the Council did not yet know it, the day would come when they would wish they had never turned them away. The years after the rejection were hard for everyone, but they also became the years that shaped the new human way, because Earth was no longer asking for help or waiting for approval from anyone. It was building everything from the ground up, and it was doing it with purpose and unity. People who once argued about borders or politics now worked together because they had no one else to rely on. The old fear of being left behind was replaced by the drive to stand alone. Ethan Brooks had become Admiral of the United Earth Defense Fleet by then, and he spent his days on the command deck of the Horizon, watching over the stars and thinking about how much had changed since the Council turned their backs on them. The colonies had grown strong. Mars was no longer a red desert, but a living world filled with green domes and tall towers. Titan's dark sky glowed with light from its massive refineries, and Luna had become the bridge between all human worlds. Amanda Brooks, his younger sister, and the chief engineer of the fleet had designed reactors that used the new Perseid energy field, discovered a few years back. It gave their ship speed and endurance that no alien vessel could match. Humans now moved faster than anyone in known space, and they did it without Council help. But for all the progress, there was still a quiet sense of loneliness in the hearts of many people. Lisa Carter, now the head of all human diplomacy, worked hard to keep peace with small neutral systems that still traded with them. Her job was not easy because every message had to be careful. Every word had to sound strong but not hostile. She often thought about the old days when the Council halls were full of voices from 100 worlds, and how she once believed that cooperation would make the galaxy better. But now she understood something deeper. Peace was not given. It was built, and it had to be guarded every day. One evening, as she stood on the observation deck of the Horizon, she saw the fleet lined up in the black void, each ship glowing with soft blue light from its new engines. She remembered the first time she saw a human ship among alien ones back when humanity was small and uncertain, and now looking at these giants of metal and power, she could not help but feel pride. Ethan joined her at the glass and said quietly, "They still watch us?" Lisa asked who, and he said, "The Council. Their probes come close every few weeks. They think we do not notice, but we do." And she said then, "Let them watch. Maybe they will learn something," and he smiled a little because he knew she still believed in hope, even when the rest of them had stopped. The next morning, reports came from the Vega frontier, the edge of human space where colonies met the unknown. A group of merchant ships had been stopped by unknown vessels they claimed to be neutral traders, but their transponders carried council codes. Ethan listened to the report with a frown and said, "They are testing us, Amanda," who was nearby said maybe they want to see how strong we have become. Lisa suggested that maybe it was a mistake, but deep down she knew Ethan was right. They were testing humanity, and the test was only beginning. The next few months were tense as the council ships continued to appear near human borders. They claimed to be patrolling against pirates, but their presence grew larger and more frequent. Ethan sent patrols to shadow them without engaging, but the tension spread through the colonies. People began to talk about war, though no one wanted it. The news channels filled with debates and old wounds reopened. Some said humanity should attack first, and others said they should stay quiet and strong. Ethan stood before the Defense Council on Earth and said, "We will not start a war, but we will not be caught unprepared either." And from that moment, new fleets were built faster than ever. Amanda's factories worked day and night, new shipyards opened on Europa and Ceres, and the hum of construction filled the void. Lisa tried to reach out through the few contacts she still had among neutral races, but most of them refused to talk. They were afraid the council would punish them. And soon the silence became total. One day a message came through from a small station on the edge of the Vega system. The signal was weak and broken, but the words were clear. "We found something. It was not pirates. It was council drones. We have proof." And then the line went dead. Ethan sent a rescue team immediately, but by the time they arrived, the station was gone. Only debris floated where it once was. The crew never found survivors, and the black box data confirmed it. The council drones were there, planting something unknown on human satellites. Ethan played the footage for Lisa, the cold light of the recording flickering over their faces as they watched alien ships move through human space without fear or hesitation. She said, "This is not a mistake," and he said, "No, this is a message." Lisa sent a final diplomatic request to the council, asking for an explanation. But no answer came, not even an acknowledgement that her message was received. That silence said more than any words could. A few days later, the first council patrol was spotted, again this time closer to the main colonies when human fighters tried to escort them away. The aliens refused, and when the confrontation turned violent, one of the drones exploded, damaging a human transport ship full of civilians. That explosion changed everything. It spread anger like wildfire across every human world. Protests turned into rallies, and rallies turned into calls for unity under one banner. Ethan knew war was near, but he also knew humanity was ready. This time, no one was afraid. The fleet stood ready. The colonies fortified their defenses, and even the smallest settlements sent supplies to the military. Amanda coordinated ship production from Mars, and every day she sent Ethan reports of progress. She told him, "We can match them ship for ship, soon maybe even surpass them," and he said, "Good, but we will fight only if we must." Lisa tried again to reach someone in the council through secret channels, but the few replies she received were short and afraid. One friend told her quietly, "They are planning something big," and then cut the line. The signs were everywhere. Council fleets were moving, and their news networks began spreading lies about human aggression, claiming Earth had attacked their borders. First, Lisa showed Ethan the reports and said they are preparing their people for war. And he said then it has already started. The following weeks were filled with preparations, ships fueled, soldiers trained, and supply lines stretched across the stars. Yet despite the looming fear, there was also unity. Like never before, people on Earth watched their skies and said, "We will not bow again." The rejection that once hurt so much had become their strength. Lisa looked at Ethan one last time before he departed for the Vega front and said, "Promise me you will try for peace one more time." He nodded and said, "I always do." And then he turned away as the horizon rose into the sky, its engines lighting the darkness below. Humanity was no longer a scattered species, begging for acceptance. It was a single force bound by determination and the will to stand free. And though the council believed they could still control the future, they were wrong, because the humans they had rejected had become something stronger than anyone expected. And in the silent black between stars, the war that no one wanted was already beginning to breathe. The silence between the stars before a storm was heavy and cold, and Ethan Brooks could feel it every time he looked out from the command deck of the Horizon. He had seen many battles in his life, but never one like this, because this time he was not fighting for land or for a single nation. He was fighting for all of humanity, and everyone knew it. The Vega frontier had become the line that divided peace from war. Fleets moved like shadows across the darkness, and every signal, every movement, was watched and measured. Lisa Carter sat in her office on Earth trying to find any way to stop what was coming. She sent message after message to the Council, but each one returned unanswered or ignored. Her aides told her that maybe the Council was divided, that some wanted war while others wanted peace. But no one knew for sure. It did not matter anymore, because the ships were already moving, and soon the talk would end and the fighting would begin. Amanda Brooks worked from her lab on Mars, barely sleeping as she and her team prepared the new defense systems. The new energy shields were still unstable, but she believed they could turn the tide of any battle. She kept telling herself that her work might save lives, even if her brother had to risk his to use it. Ethan knew she was pushing too hard, but he said nothing because he needed her brilliance now, more than ever. The reports coming in from the frontier were clear. Small Council patrols were testing the borders again, claiming to look for pirates, but their drones were mapping every colony and every fleet position. When one of the human scouts intercepted their communication, it became clear that the Council was gathering intelligence for a strike plan. Ethan played the intercepted transmission for his officers. The alien voice said the humans must be contained before they expand further, and the word contained echoed in the room like an insult. Ethan turned off the playback and said quietly, "They see us as a disease, not as equals," and everyone in the room knew he was right. Lisa finally received a short message from one of her few remaining contacts in the Council. The message said they are preparing something called Directive 17, and then the signal went dark. She tried to find out what it meant, but there was nothing in any record. The Council had sealed it under high clearance. She went to the United Earth Command Council and warned them that something was coming, but no one knew how. Soon Ethan, meanwhile, ordered all ships to defensive positions along the Vega line. He told his crews to stay calm, but to be ready, because he knew that the first shot would not come from them. The days passed slowly, the tension building like a weight pressing on every heart. And then it happened. A convoy of human ships carrying supplies to the frontier colonies was intercepted by a Council task force. The aliens claimed it was a mistake, but when one of the human captains refused to stop, they opened fire. The convoy tried to flee, but half of them were destroyed before reinforcements arrived. By the time Ethan's fleet reached them, the attackers were gone, leaving only wreckage floating among the stars. The news spread fast and anger swept through every human world. Lisa tried to calm the governments, but the people wanted action on Mars. Workers volunteered to serve as pilots, and soldiers on Luna shipyards doubled their pace. Even on Earth, crowds filled the streets chanting words that had not been spoken since the early days of the space age. "We stand alone and we will not bow." The Council made no public statement, but their fleets began to move from all corners of their territory, forming near the neutral zones. The old fear of humanity that had driven them to rejection was now driving them to aggression. Directive 17. It seemed was not a policy, but a command to subdue humanity before it became a true rival. The Council believed they could control the outcome with a show, a force they thought humans would submit once again. But Ethan knew better. Humans had built their strength from being underestimated, and that mistake would cost the Council dearly. The first major clash came near Vega Station, a small outpost guarding the border. When sensors detected a large fleet approaching, Ethan ordered his ships into formation. He sent one final message to the approaching fleet saying, "This is human space, turn back or be fired upon." But the reply came cold and sharp, stating that the Council had authority over all contested systems and that human expansion violated their charter. Ethan gave them one last chance, and when they ignored it, he said to his crew, "They wanted to see our strength, show them the horizon moved forward," leading the line as energy beams lit the dark like lightning. The first wave of Council ships struck hard, but the human shields held. Amanda's new systems worked even better than expected, and the humans returned fire with precision. The Battle lasted for hours. The space around Vega burned bright from the explosions of ships, both alien and human. Ethan watched as his fleet fought with determination. No one broke formation. No one turned away. Even the smallest patrol ship fought, until its guns ran dry when the smoke cleared. The Council fleet was gone, retreating into the void, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Humanity had won its first battle of the war. But Ethan did not feel triumph, only sadness, because he knew this was just the beginning. Lisa heard the news on Earth and closed her eyes in quiet sorrow. She knew what it meant. There was no turning back. Now she gave a speech that was broadcast to all colonies, her voice calm and steady as she said, "We did not choose this fight, but we will not run from it either. We stand together now more than ever. We are one people, one will, one future." Her words spread through the systems, giving hope to those who feared what was coming. Amanda sat in her lab watching the footage of the battle, trying to find flaws in her systems and improve them before the next wave. She whispered to herself that she would not let her brother fight without the best tools she could give him. And she kept working even as the night sky over Mars glowed red from the reflection of the shipyards below on the Council worlds. Panic began to spread among the delegates because no one had expected the humans to win the first fight their fleets were supposed to break quickly. But instead they stood like iron and hit back with power that few believed possible. Some of the alien leaders began to question the wisdom of the war. But others pushed harder, claiming that humanity must be destroyed before it becomes unstoppable. In that division, the Council began to crack and the seeds of their own downfall were sown. Ethan gathered his officers after the battle and said, "This victory means nothing if we become like them. We fight to live, not to conquer." And everyone nodded. But deep down, he knew the line between defense and domination was thin and hard to hold. Lisa continued to send offers for peace, even though none were answered, because she still believed that somewhere among the Council, there were voices that wanted to end this madness. She refused to give up hope. Even when Ethan told her hope will not stop their guns, she said then it will keep us human, and he could not argue with that. The war had begun, not with grand speeches or declarations, but with fear, mistrust, and pride. And now there was no easy way to stop it. But through the fire that both sides had lit together in the end, humanity would learn that strength came with a price, and the Council would learn that rejection came with consequences, far greater than they had ever imagined. The first war between the Galactic Council and humanity began without a grand declaration or ceremony. It started with a single flare of light over the Vega frontier when the Council fleets crossed into human space with banners of order and peace, claiming that they were there to restore balance, but everyone knew the truth. They came to take back what they had once rejected. They believed that humans would kneel again. They believed that fear would break them, but they had forgotten what fear had done to humanity before it had made them stronger. Admiral Ethan Brooks stood on the bridge of the horizon as alarms filled the air. His fleet stretched wide across the black sky, thousands of ships ready and waiting, each one armed with the new systems that Amanda Brooks had designed, engines that pulsed with blue fire and weapons that burned brighter than any star. The Council ships were larger but slower, their captains confident in old power and tradition. They expected humans to fall back to defend, to plead for peace. Ethan watched the incoming readings and said quietly, "They still do not understand us." He ordered the fleet to hold position. The first shots came from the Council. Bright streaks of light crossing the void. Like spears, the shields flared around the horizon as energy waves rippled through the hull. Amanda's systems held the line, and for a moment, silence returned. Then Ethan gave the only command that mattered: fire, and the sky came alive with human. Defiance beams of white light tore through the darkness, striking the alien fleet faster than their sensors could react. The Council had never seen tactics like these. Humans moved with fluid precision, every ship communicating through fast AI links, sharing data instantly while the Council relied on slow command chains within minutes. The front line of alien cruisers began to break and retreat, but Ethan did not pursue. Instead, he ordered his ships to protect the colonies. The war was not about revenge. It was about survival. Amanda watched from her control station on Mars as data from the battle streamed across her screens. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from awe. The systems worked better than she ever imagined, and for the first time in her life she realized that humanity might not only survive but win. Lisa Carter stayed on Earth. Listening to reports from the front lines, she spoke to leaders of every colony, keeping them united through calm and courage. Her voice carried across the network, saying, "This is not a war for glory, this is a war for our right to exist." The people listened and stood firm. No one ran, no one surrendered. The council fleets grew desperate. They launched wave after wave. But the more they pushed, the stronger the humans became on Mars. Children watched the night sky as flashes of light marked battles far away, and parents told them to remember that this was the moment when humanity proved itself. The council command was in chaos. Many of their worlds began to question why they were fighting. Some said it was to restore order. Others whispered that it was because they feared what humans would become. But the truth was simple. They could not stand to see the rejected rise above them. They had built their pride on being the center of the galaxy, and humanity had shattered that illusion. At the Second Battle of Vega, the Council sent their largest fleet in centuries, hoping to crush the humans once and for all. Ethan met them head-on, his fleet smaller but faster. Amanda's new energy cores gave them unmatched mobility. They weaved through enemy lines like smoke, striking from every angle. The Council admirals tried to regroup, but their communications fell apart as human hackers broke into their systems and took control of half their drones. Panic spread through the alien ranks. Their ships collided, their formation collapsed, and within hours what began as an invasion turned into a rout. Ethan stood silent as he watched. Their retreat he did not celebrate because every victory cost lives. Every name on the casualty lists reminded him that survival always carried pain on Earth. Lisa spoke again to the people, reminding them that compassion must remain even in war. She said, "We fight for our freedom, not for their destruction." And though her words were noble, she knew deep inside that the Council might never understand peace again. Amanda visited the memorial walls on Mars where the names of the fallen were engraved. She placed her hand on the cold metal and whispered a promise to keep building better shields to protect the living across the stars. The human colonies had turned into fortresses, factories worked without rest, shipyards expanded, and in less than a year humanity had created what no other species had ever done. They built a self-sustaining network that no outside force could cut off. The Council finally realized their mistake. They had thought humanity weak, but now they saw a force, united by pain and determination. Their diplomats began to whisper about a truce, but their militaries refused to admit defeat, and the fighting continued. Though each day it became clearer who would stand at the end. Ethan met Lisa through a secure link, their faces tired and marked by the endless strain of command. She asked him if he believed the Council would ever stop, and he said, "They will stop when they have lost everything." And she said then, "They will come asking for what they once denied," and he nodded. Knowing that day was coming, Amanda meanwhile discovered something alarming in the captured Council data. She had intercepted plans for an attack on Earth itself, a desperate move to break human spirit. She sent the information directly to Ethan, who immediately prepared defenses. Earth had been at peace for years, but now the people rallied. Once again, thousands volunteered to defend the homeworld. When the Council fleet finally arrived near Earth, they expected panic. Instead, they found an army waiting in silence. Their ships filled the orbits, their weapons ready. The battle that followed was fierce, the largest the galaxy had ever seen. Beams of light turned the void into fire. Entire formations vanished in seconds, but the human defense held firm. Ethan's fleet appeared from hyperspace, striking the Council's rear lines with perfect timing. Amanda's shields absorbed every counterattack, and soon the enemy fleet was in ruins. The Council commander sent a final transmission begging for ceasefire. Ethan stared at the screen and said, "You wanted control, now you get mercy." The battle ended with silence, broken only by the hum of engines and the soft voices of survivors reporting back across the stars. News spread faster than light. Humanity had done what no one thought possible. They had defeated the combined fleets of the Galactic Council worlds that once mocked them, now watched in awe and fear. Lisa stood on the balcony of the Earth Command Tower, looking up at the sky where flashes of the last battle still glowed faintly. She whispered, "They will come back. not as enemies but as beggars, and she was right, because somewhere far away on Arvalus Prime the council leaders were already meeting, in secret, trying to decide how to face the new power they had tried to destroy. They were not united anymore. Fear and regret filled the hall as they realized the truth. The humans they rejected had become the guardians of the stars, and now the galaxy would have to learn to live under their light. Years passed after the last great battle and the stars became quiet again. The scars of war still marked the edges of human space, but there was peace, not the peace of treaties or promises, but the peace that comes when one side learns that it can no longer win. The Galactic Council had withdrawn from the borders, their fleets broken, their pride shattered, and their worlds filled with questions they had never asked before they watched humanity from afar, trying to understand how a young race, with so little, had become something that even ancient powers feared. Admiral Ethan Brooks, now older, but still sharp, commanded the new fleet of the Line, a force that did not seek war but ensured that no war would ever come again. His ship, the Horizon, now a symbol of human unity, drifted quietly in orbit above Mars from its windows. He could see the great shipyards that Amanda Brooks had built, where thousands of workers crafted new vessels not for conquest, but for exploration. Amanda herself had become known across every colony as the architect of the new era. Her designs now focused on rebuilding what had been lost during the war. She spent long hours in her lab, developing systems that could heal worlds instead of destroy them yet. Sometimes when the stars were bright, she still thought of the battles and the screams and the moments when the line between victory and extinction had been so thin. She wondered if peace could ever truly last. Lisa Carter now led the United Colonies, her voice still steady and calm. She guided billions through the hard years of recovery, making sure that humanity did not repeat the mistakes of the Council. She often said, "Power without purpose is the start of ruin," and her words became the foundation of the new charter that defined human space not as an empire, but as a network of free worlds working together. The colonies listened because they remembered what unity had achieved, and they knew what division had once cost them. Far beyond the human borders, the Council was breaking apart. Their member species argued among themselves. Some blamed the humans, others blamed their leaders, but all of them feared what the future might bring. The Council's central world, Arvalus Prime, once filled with arrogance, now lay quiet. Its grand halls empty and its fleets scattered. Its leaders no longer spoke with authority but with regret. Many of them sent messages to humanity asking for talks, for peace, for trade. But humanity remembered the years of silence, the years when they had begged for recognition and been denied. So Lisa chose not to reply. Instead, she told her people that respect must be earned, not requested, and that humanity would not kneel again. Ethan watched the reports and knew that Lisa was right. But he also knew that the galaxy was changing too fast for anyone to control. Amanda came to see him one night, bringing with her new data from the deep space sensors. Strange energy readings had appeared beyond the known rim. Nothing like the Council. Nothing like human technology. Ethan studied the data and said, "Maybe this is what comes after every war. Something new. Something waiting to see what is left." Amanda nodded, but she could not hide her worry. She had built defenses for every kind of weapon known, yet what lay beyond the rim was unknown. Lisa later joined them through the secure link, her face thoughtful. As always, she listened to their report and said, "If there is something out there, then we must meet it as explorers, not as soldiers. Humanity has earned the right to look forward, not backward." Ethan agreed, though a part of him would always remain ready for battle. He knew that peace required strength and vigilance, so he ordered a fleet of exploration to be prepared, ships with long-range drives built using Amanda's latest engines, designed not for war, but for endurance. Weeks later, the first fleet of explorers launched from Mars. Thousands gathered to watch as the ships rose into the sky, leaving behind trails of silver light among the stars. Hope burned bright once more. The transmissions from the fleet spoke of wonders, unseen worlds glowing with strange colors, ancient ruins that hinted at civilizations older than any known in time. The reports reached even the Council worlds, who began to send their own explorers, some human, some alien, working together for the first time in centuries. It was Amanda's technology that made this possible. Her designs now freely shared across the stars because she believed that knowledge must never again be locked behind pride. Ethan still commanded the horizon, but now his missions were peaceful. He visited worlds to sign new alliances and help rebuild what had been destroyed. On one such journey, he met a delegation from the former council worlds, their leader, a quiet being named Celis, who bowed before him and said, "We feared you once, Admiral. Now we hope to learn from you." Ethan looked at him for a long moment and said, "Learn from us, but remember that we once learned by being ignored, and the lesson nearly destroyed the galaxy." Celis bowed again and promised that this time they would listen. Lisa later received news of that meeting and felt a small spark of relief. Maybe the galaxy could heal. Amanda continued her work until one evening she sat alone watching the twin moons of Mars. She thought of all that had happened, of the war, of the loss of the triumph, and she realized that humanity had changed forever. They were no longer the outsiders, they were the example, and with that came the weight of responsibility. She recorded a message that night, a message that spread across every human colony. She said, "We must remember who we were before we became strong, because that memory will keep us human." It became one of the most replayed messages in history. Years turned into decades. The Galactic Council no longer existed in its old form. Instead, a new assembly arose, one built on equality between all races. Humanity did not lead it, but guided it quietly from within. Ethan, Amanda, and Lisa became symbols of that unity, their names spoken with respect across thousands of worlds. When Ethan finally retired, he returned to Earth to live by the ocean. He would sit on the shore and watch the stars, thinking about all the friends who never came back. Amanda visited him, often bringing news from the colonies, and sometimes they would sit together in silence because words were no longer needed. They both knew that humanity had walked through fire and come out brighter. Lisa eventually passed her leadership to a new generation, but her teachings remained engraved in the hearts of all humans and aliens who lived under the same sky. And in the end, the galaxy was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of hope on the last night of his life. Ethan looked up at the sky and saw a new constellation forming, the ships of the new exploration fleet returning home, their lights shining across the blackness. He smiled and whispered to the stars, "We are still here," and that was the truth of it. Humanity had been rejected, had been tested, had been broken and rebuilt, and now they stood among the stars, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the proof that no force, no council, no ancient empire could ever silence a species that refused to give up the galaxy. Turned slowly around them, full of life, full of promise, and for the first time in history, every world, human or alien, shared the same dream that the light of understanding would never again fade from the stars.